Watch The Toxic Avenger now on Screambox. The radioactive superhero that's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes is available to watch now from the comfort of your home. Bloody FM listeners get a special introductory offer by going to bit.ly/ToxyFM. That's bit.ly/TOXIEFM for a special offer on Screambox.
Sometimes you gotta do something.
This week's episode is sponsored by the retro supernatural slasher, Blood Barn. Set in the summer of '85, Blood Barn follows Josie and her 6 closest friends as they gather for one last weekend at her family's secluded barn before college. But when a long-buried family secret is disturbed, a malevolent spirit awakens, possessing them one by one in a brutal quest for revenge. Critic Jesse Hobson of Citadump calls it a splattery love letter to 80s DIY horror. Once it gets going, it works. Blending the cabin in the woods paranoia of the Evil Dead with the possession-fueled chaos of The Exorcist, Blood Barn delivers practical gore, escalating dread, and a race to survive until sunrise. Don't miss Blood Barn. Watch the trailer and learn more now.
Welcome to Safe Room, your weekly source for horror gaming discussions and proudly part of Bloody Disgusting's Bloody FM podcast network. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, and due to some schedule fuckery on my part this week, Neil couldn't join me, but have no fear, I'm not going to subject you all to 90 minutes of me monologuing, as I'm joined by longtime friend of the show, and at this point, he might as well be the actual third chair of the podcast, that being Bloody Disgusting writer Aaron Boehm. Aaron, welcome back once again, man.
Thanks for having me. Always happy to be here.
Yeah, you're doing so real solid this week, subbing in at the last minute. So we appreciate you being able to do that. And also, you know, as we've been talking offline, you've been inundated with games, both for review and just in your free time. So I figured you'd be a perfect guest to have for this new sort of grab bag coverage approach to games that we have on the show.
Yeah, February was surprisingly packed with games. Even, like there was too many for me to even play. And even then I was also going back and playing other old ones too. So yeah, February was wild for me with games.
Yeah, and I mean, getting right into the thick of things, like based on the list of stuff that we both brought this week, what are you feeling like chatting about first?
The first one I'm going to talk about is Romeo is a Dead Man, which is the new Suda 51 game. Suda 51 is somebody that I always kind of think I appreciate sometimes, but don't always ring true with. Like, he doesn't always 100% grab me. I think that I appreciate the fact that he is very much somebody who you can look at a game and go, oh, that's a Suda game. You know what I mean? It's very apparent. He just has such a maximalist style that is so great to see, especially, the more you see mainstream stuff getting sanded down into, kind of, similar looking stuff. It's always great to see something that's wild and out there, even if it doesn't completely ring with you. But Romeo's a Dead Man is his latest, and man, this one was really fun. I had a great time with it. This is probably the game that has grabbed me the most of his. I think maybe before that, No More Heroes maybe was the other one that really got me. But man, this one is such a blast. I don't think the story 100% works for me, but there's just so much going on that it feels so just completely unique. It's about, you are like a law enforcer, and somehow you get like almost killed by a monster. Your name's Romeo, Stargazer, of course. And your time traveling grandfather comes and saves you and turns you into Dead Man, who is like a half robot hero kind of. And you join the space-time FBI and try to put the world back together because like some sort of event happened that fractured the space-time continuum. And the whole time you're also trying to find your girlfriend, who is of course named Juliet. And you just keep finding like doppelgangers of her that turn out to be big monsters. It's so wild. Like within the first hour of this game, you see, it starts out, you've got like kind of a standard 3D action looking, 3D game. And then suddenly there's like hand animated cutscenes, and then there's like the credits look like a kaleidoscope, and then
Mm.
your home base is all presented in like a top down like pixel art like 8-bit style. It's just there's just a there's just so it's like the most game you can get. It's really wild. Um, but it also is solid. Um, it's solid gameplay wise too. Like
Mm.
it's just a kind of standard melee action game, sort of like not exactly like a Devil May Cry, but sort of in that same lineage.
Mm.
But you have your various melee weapons. Then you do have some ranged weapons, which kind of are mixed in, but really melee is the focus. And it's nothing like too like complex, but it
Mm.
does have like really great like just big like splashes of blood, just like there's so much blood on the screen all the time, and like just the sort of audio visual spectacle of it all really kind of sells it. It's just a really interesting game. It's wild. And I like I said, I don't think the narrative comes together. It seems to like continue to introduce new things over and over and over again. Almost like there was a part where I like wrote down something as I was taking notes for my review. I was like, "Oh, this is definitely where the plot is going," and then it felt like it was just like nobody mentioned it ever again. So, it
Mm.
felt like it's kind of all over the place, but it's really fun. There's one clever twist that I like to the combat, and some of it comes from like this 8-bit hub that you're in. You have like the
Mm.
like spaceship that you're traveling through with all the other members of the space-time FBI. Um, and there's some really clever twists. Like you have you're fighting a lot of like zombies and like kind of like just Resident Evil style mutants. It's they're not the most interesting enemies, but every once in a while when you're fighting things, you can find these thing called seeds, and you
Mm.
plant them in a garden back on your ship, and then they grow into zombies that can be used for combat, and they kind of act like little ultimate moves that like moves that are on like little cooldown timers.
Mm.
And you can you collect them, and then you grow them, and you can combine them, and you can try and make them more powerful and all sorts of stuff. And they kind of add a little extra layer to the combat that makes it a little more interesting.
Mm.
I had it is so weird because it's like you plant them, and then every time you go to like grab them, you have to do this same thing where like you see the animation of like somebody reaching a hand down to the hand that's coming out of the grave, and then you like hold a button, and it's like rip as you pull the guy out. It's so strange. It's so strange. Um, but satisfying. Like I was just
Mm.
like every time I'd finish, I'd get to like a checkpoint, and I could go back to the ship. I'd be like, oh man, I can't wait to go check out on my zombies. Um, and one other thing that I really loved about the character progression is you'd get like your XP equivalent.
Mm.
And instead of just like spending it on like a skill tree, what you had was you would go and play this little arcade game, and it was like almost like a Pac-Man style maze. And for every little bit you moved, costed your XP, and you would like navigate around this maze and pick up the little power-ups that would give you your like, it's like, oh, if you pick this one up, it's vitality. If you pick this one up, it's
Mm.
like attack. And you had to like navigate your way through the maze to pick up the things you were looking for. So not only were you like trying to plan out what you wanted to prioritize, but you're like, okay, if I
Mm.
go here, then the next path I could go down would be either these two. And it was such an interesting little way to make it more engaging. It's just like
Mm.
there's a lot of little small things that the game does well that make it just more unique. It takes like the same kind of, you've got this concept of like these like special attacks that are, on cooldowns. Lots of
Mm.
games have them, but now they're because of zombies, and you're growing them in a garden or whatever. And that makes it just a little bit more, exciting and fun. Um, and then you have like, oh, you got a skill tree, but now it's like in a Pac-Man arcade game, and
Mm.
it's just cool. It's cool, man. It's like hard to like I don't think it's for everyone, but I
Mm.
think it is definitely something that's like if you watch the trailer and you're at all intrigued by it, like
Mm.
there's probably something there. It's just so maximal and interesting. Like it's just like so out there. And like I said, it feels kind of like nothing else. Um despite the fact that it is kind of like in a lot of these action genre tropes.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with a lot of Suda 51 games, right? Is that it's he is this very like high concept type of storyteller and creative that wants to throw all these ideas, and they don't always necessarily mesh all that well together, but it makes for something that is wholly unique in
Mhm.
its own sort of like category almost, right? I think last year Neil and I uh, reviewed Hotel Barcelona, which he was
Mhm.
involved in, and it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, from a gameplay perspective, I really didn't like that game. It was incredibly broken and sort of like underwhelming in terms of the gameplay, but in terms of like the presentation of the world and the utilization of art styles and FMV and these like VHS style found footage tapes, it just felt like this collage of like, I don't know, like like punk rock
Yep.
anti-establishment kind of, in terms of just like, I have all of these things that I want to do and I'm going to present them in a way that is in contrast with how a normal sane
Yep.
creative would want to present these, so that way you can appeal to everyone. Whereas he's a developer, and it sounds like Romeo is a Dead Man is further indicative of this, that is wholly unconcerned with appealing to the masses and is more interested in providing something that it might be constructed with some of the action sort of character progression frameworks that we're all
Mhm.
accustomed to, but
Mhm.
presents them in a way that is very foreign to how you typically experience those things. And I don't know. I think I would rather play a game like this that it sounds good. It also sounds incredibly messy, perhaps, but I would
Yep.
rather play like this messy game that is unapologetic in doing something distinctly different, or at least remixing familiar mechanics in a manner that like gives it its own life, and kind of like makes it more notable than just like another sort of action brawler, if you will. So
Mhm.
the way that you've described it, like, yeah, that sounds perfectly in line with what I know about Suda 51, and ultimately, um, it sounds kind of like almost a hodgepodge of things that he's done previously,
Yep.
but with this new sci-fi flavor to it.
Yeah, and it had some cool twists with how they did level design. It kind of
Hmm.
took a while for me to get the rhythm of what they were trying to do. But
Mhm.
one of the things they do is that you go through the levels, and they're usually like you're in like a mall or like city hall or whatever, at a different time period.
Mhm.
But they have this thing where you like find little TVs, and you go into like a subspace world, and that world is like kind of like all like just kind of like all polygonal and that kind of
Mhm.
thing. Just more geometric shapes and that sort of thing. But the key is that what you're doing is like you get to like a place where you can't progress in the normal world, and then you go into subspace, and the subspace kind of mirrors the regular world, and then you can kind of progress past that and then move back to the world, and you'll be able to
Mhm.
navigate around. It's kind of interesting. They did some like I don't think all the levels are created equally,
Mhm.
but there are some levels that really take advantage of that really well. And also there's like one level that like it's mostly, like I said, it's like the sci-fi wild ultra violent action game. um uh but there is one level that takes place in like an asylum, and it just turns it into a horror game. Like there's a
Mhm.
like you basically are like there's basically a stalker enemy type thing going on,
Mhm.
kind of. At least at least certain spaces are like there's a big monster here and you can't kill it, and it turns it kind of into a horror game for a while, and it's really interesting. It kind of flipped it on its head and felt very very different. But yeah, it's got that, but then also like every time you kill a boss you have to do like a little quick time event, and you do like a wrestling move on them or something. Like it's just all over the board. It's so weird, it's so wild, and like I said, it's the kind of game that like I don't think everyone's gonna love, but like there's something there to respect. And you'll probably find something interesting.
Think that the reason that Suda 51 is like, I don't know if allowed to get away with is the way to phrase it, but like
Right.
his ability to kind of like blend this smorgasbord of interests that he has together, I think really does speak to his genuine love of like genre, right? We
Hmm.
saw that with Hotel Barcelona, and each of those little biome worlds were all themed around different horror subgenres. And that was one of the coolest things about that game, was the fact that each one of those worlds you visited had its own distinct horror flavor. And it sounds like here, furthermore, is just like his blending of love of genre that he's explored in, past games, whether it's Lollipop Chainsaw, No More Heroes, or, to what you were just saying, even like Fire Pro Wrestling, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's just really cool to see a creative that is able to like continually be referencing past entries of their work, or I suppose like still having influence from that and having that in their games, but is able to remix it enough that it doesn't seemingly feel like just a carbon copy maybe of what they've already done. Whether that's because you're kind of like caught up in the insanity of, again, all these different things that he's blending together, or just the kind of like, I don't know, just like it being this overstimulating type of experience that really, it seems, is terrified to let players be bored for more than like a second.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I'll have to check that one out.
It's a cool game, man. It's pretty cool.
That's the thing, like with his games, I can't say that all of the ones I've played, like I've loved, but they are, I would say they're unforgettable in a way that very few other, game directors can say about their work, because, like I said, you can draw some of the, bits and pieces maybe from past games, but, this seems like it is very much its own unique thing that, I can't speak to it, but, I wouldn't be surprised if like furthermore he's experimenting with like that multimedia, multiple styles of graphics that you were talking about, and just like the variety between in-game cutscenes or in-game graphics, and then the cutscenes that you have going on and the different art styles. It's just a really fucking cool looking game from what I'm seeing of it.
Yeah. And that was all, like I said, those styles were all within like the first like hour of the game. Like there's also like the cutscenes are often generally like graphic novel stuff, like to the point where like it shows like the panels like that you're moving between. It's wild. There's like an animated sequence near the end of the game that is just like totally weird and trippy. It's
very cool.
Something else, man.
Well, I'd like to get into a game now that you and I have both been playing, and this is a more recent release. Naturally, big game that we're not talking about this week that was released at the end of February would be Resident Evil 9. But, since Neil's not here, I'm going to hold off until he's back to chat about that. But you and I have both been playing a recently released game, that being Mewgenics, which is, the turn-based cat horror themed game from Ed McMillan and Tyler Galil, which, is the Ed McMillan being, the guy behind Binding of Isaac and whatnot, and games such as that, which, just a few weeks ago, I was chatting about at length with Neil. Binding of Isaac, easily one of my favorite games of all time, probably top 3, like forever game for me.
Wow.
And so Mewgenics is one of those games that has been in development for a long while. And, now that it's finally here, it really is, I think, the best representation of like a creative duo, both in terms of like humor, mechanics, art style, genre influences. But, I wasn't prepared sort of for the amount of depth that there is with the mechanics here, and, the roguelite nature of it being a turn-based strategy RPG, but it has this like cat theme to it. And I remember thinking originally, I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I like cats, that could work. But at the same time, I was like, is this game going to have the same personality, the same type of humor that has been in his previous games? But also, like, is this cat theme going to do away or overshadow a lot of the horror aspects of his previous games that I personally really, really love? And I think that Mewgenics is surprising for a multitude of reasons, but I think that, for me especially, I just love to see a game that is so weird, but is so indicative of, past successes in terms of development and art, art style and whatnot. But adding this whole new layer of depth that, if you went from playing Binding of Isaac to this, you'd be like, whoa, holy shit. Like this could be some people's new forever game. It's certainly one of my forever games now already. And I've only played about 10 hours of it, but, so I guess I'll just, for people that don't know, Mewgenics, you basically have a team of 4 cats. Each of them can have different abilities and whatnot and stats that are random. They quite literally start as strays, and then you band 4 of them together and you go out on these missions in turn-based strategy. And so you'll be fighting, some monsters and things that are showing up from, the Binding of Isaac sort of universe, some new things, but I think overall, like the depth of the mechanics that is tied to the roguelike nature, but also the like breeding. And there's going to be more to say on that in a minute, but like the breeding system, which is intrinsically tied to the notion of this being a roguelite, right? That notion that it's like, okay, you're in roguelites, you're always doing something to push your ability to like make it further into this game, even if you lose your entire squad. And that system, which we can get into in a little bit, is something that I think is really kind of ingenious for this game. But how have you found your time with Mewgenics? I think you said you played about what, five or so hours?
About 5 or so hours into it. It's kind of a perfect like Steam Deck game for me. Like I
Yeah.
just, I have 20 minutes to play. I'm gonna hop on my Steam Deck and play a couple matches of Mewgenics. Man, this game feels so good. Like
Mm,
just the tactics feel so good. Like I love tactics games. I'm like a huge fan.
yeah.
Um, and this just really has it. It's got that. It has that like Into the Breach style feel of like, it's a small grid. This isn't like XCOM where you're going over a big, huge map. This is just like, boom, here's your one screen grid of guys. Um, you've got your team, and there's a lot of stuff about like pushing and comboing and that sort of thing that
Mm,
feels really satisfying. And
yeah.
like, it just feels like there are so many options given like the roguelike nature of it with all these like randomized abilities or
Mm,
traits or anything like that. It just feels like there's just so many options that are not only like, you know, it's not just like the number of options, it's the fact that they're all well thought out and they
yeah.
all, like you get a level up and you're just like, damn, which one do I pick? Like these are all
Mhm.
good. Like it just feels impossible to pick because it feels like every ability is so well thought out. Um, as a way of like doubling down on a class or like whatever your strategy is. I just think it's so neat. I really like it's kind of that thing of like in these tactic games sometimes you have this battle between like sometimes you have the XCOM thing, which is like you have like chances and stuff like that, and there's a lot of
Mm,
a lot of dice rolls and stuff going on. But this feels like this like perfect knowledge type of tactics game where it's like you're able to figure out exactly what's going to happen with every attack and all that sort of thing. So you're really able to fully plan things out and not worry too much to random you know dice rolls or whatever. um
yeah. I mean,
uh
the amount of modifiers too that you find, which, finding different attack modifiers and things, that's like the bread and butter of any tactics game. But I find that, the variety and the potential for finding new combinations of either like power ups or just like the types of items that you find along the way. Um, so far, again, like I've said, I'm about 10 hours in, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. I think literally I've
yeah,
completed like 4 or 5%, which kind of tells you like just the amount
wild.
of content that's here, which is absolutely insane. But more importantly, like I find that, and it's indicative of the best strategy games, anytime I have had a run that has not gone my way, I don't find that I'm completely boxed into decisions that I've made, because of the fact that there's so much versatility in the way that you can
Right.
play with your characters, or in terms of rather how you want to mold them. Sometimes when you're playing games, you find yourself like locked into one specific role for a character because of the
Mhm.
fact that you've spent skill points or you've equipped this item or that item. And here, like, that's how it starts with each of your cats. It's like typically I begin and I'll have, one cat's going to be dedicated to range, one cat's going to be dedicated to melee, one's going to be like a shield character that, or a tank character that basically has an ability that lets him swap places with an ally that's about to get hit. And so I'm, giving him all my shield upgrades and whatnot. Um, but then I might get to a point where I find that, oh, I have an ability to really emphasize that tank character now can have an ability that boosts his melee attack. So all of a sudden he becomes this mobile tank, but also this kind of like brute. that has that new role for the squad. And so, like, the ways in which you can really shape your party throughout the course of a given run is like fantastic. And the fact that,
Yeah, it's really cool.
you just because you think after, a couple of different parties, like, oh, okay, I'm going to have these standbys that I'm going to go to kind of like, re- uh, kind of like be my foundation. It's like, no, every time I'm playing now, I'm trying something new to unlock new different strategies that can be just as viable in that first sort of zone as it could be later on. But it's
Hmm.
just like constantly evolving. And I think that that ultimately is why I feel like I'm just like basically completed the tutorial 10 hours in because I'm
Right,
still learning
right.
so many different things. And I think it's, again, to further emphasize just like the vast amount of content here is that um, I feel like, again, I've barely scratched the surface. You're going to see some of the same bosses, but at the same time, like I just went through the first zone again and immediately fought a boss I'd never seen before.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, okay, this opens my eyes to like having to, I suppose what I'm trying to say is like, typically when I play roguelites and you have to start over with the new party, you're like, oh, this first zone will be a cakewalk. And that
Mhm.
might be true slightly to some of the lesser battles. But at the same time, like you can still get thrown that curveball. And it's also worth mentioning that each of the zones has the normal route and then there's a hard route that you unlock. So if you want to get like right into the thick of things, you can start out really tough. And then you have that, risk reward of going that route of
Yeah.
like the rewards will be up there, but you also might get a squad wipe in the first, 3 battles.
Yep. And you saying the thing about the bosses made me remember one of the things that's really standing out for me about this game. The music is so fucking good.
Yeah, for
I
real.
don't I don't expect things to have lyrics in them.
Mhm.
So when a song has lyrics in it, especially ones as catchy as this, it's just awesome. Like there's the one I don't remember everything. I don't remember exactly. There's the one where you fight the big rat guy for the first rat
Yeah.
guy, and it's got like a just an absolute banger of a song. There's the
Mhm.
the cat fight song that's just so catchy.
Yep.
Um, what a great soundtrack. Like this is usually, a game like this feels like the kind of thing that like I could just play on mute, and
Mhm.
just kind of
Yep.
do in the background. It's like something you have up on your second screen so you can just be like, well, I'm working on something and turn to the other screen and like do a Mewgenics turn or something like that.
Mm.
But with the fact that the music is so good, I never feel like I want to have that experience. I always want to have like either my headphones in or something going on so that I can listen to it because it's just so catchy and fun in a
Yeah, I
way that
mean,
I was not expecting at all.
that's kind of the best compliment you could give this game overall is that it's so indicative of a creative sensibilities, both
Mhm.
artistically and also just like humor wise, right? Because I think that something that we had talked about previously and something I said that I really liked was the fact that this is a game just by looking at it, that this is an Ed McMillan game based
Yes.
on that art style, right? And, that's going to work for people to varying degrees. But I think what is important though is that it's very clearly identifying who that creative is and it's
Mhm.
them utilizing a foundation of style that like is popular amongst their fans but at the same time like they have this new spin on it which is the whole cat aspect of it and so that gives them the ability to kind of like build upon that style while still having that
Mhm.
that monster body horror, but also like dark humor and adolescent humor. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
sort of aspect to this game that allows for that very catchy and goofy music soundtrack. That the first time you hear it, you might be like, "What the hell?" But then it really does catch on in a way that you're like find yourself humming it. At least
Mhm.
I do when I'm in these battles and whatnot.
Yeah, I will say I am probably on the side of a lot of times I don't as much like the art style. I don't It's just like a personal taste thing. I'm not as
Sure.
into that like you know, Newgrounds Flash
Mhm.
animation
Sure.
period of time as far as like, both the art and the humor. And I do find it kind of interesting because like um I've heard interviews with Ed McMillan, just about like his thought process, and he seems like a very it's so interesting to have somebody who's like very thoughtful and self-reflective about his, game design stuff. It's like, even looking back at like Binding of Isaac, which is like a very personal thing about his relationship with like religion and
Mm.
family and all that sort of stuff. But then like and this like, is something that's like, about these sometimes these traits like, in the game there's stuff like you can have like ADHD or autism,
Right.
and those have
Mm.
like different things, and he's trying, it's very clear that he's trying to be very thoughtful about like
Mm.
it's it's not a it's not a disability, it's just something you have to work with, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Hmm.
this idea of like presenting it as, not a hindrance, but just some other
Yeah.
way of processing, and
Hmm.
that's very thoughtful. But then
Yeah.
also it's like, oh, you're fighting like fetuses in the sewer and
Yeah.
stuff. I'm just like, okay, sure, I guess, whatever, man. That's usually how I kind of like, okay, I get it. He's like trying to be very like
Mm.
self-reflective and thoughtful, and then I'm fighting like fetuses
Right.
that and like flaming poop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, sure, whatever. Just feels like it's sometimes I'm at war with my feelings on the art style, but
Mhm.
for the most part, I just like like the wireframe of this game is so good. Just like from a raw tactics standpoint, it just feels so good to play. Like it's so
Mm.
well structured, and like you said, like I'm 5 hours in. I've heard people, I've listened to podcasts where people have been like, "Oh yeah, I've been playing this for 200 hours and I'm not
Right.
done." And I'm just like, "Geez." So it's easy to see why this game was like, announced whatever, like a what was it, a decade and a half ago or something like
Yeah.
that,
Yes.
and has been on and off in production for so long. It's very easy to see um, the amount of work you put in this game on
Mm.
in the game you're playing, because it certainly is pretty staggering.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, for somebody that, I'm aware he's made other games other than The Binding of Isaac, but that's what I'm familiar with. I haven't
Right.
played his entire catalog of games, and so to be such a big fan of Binding of Isaac, and not to say I wanted more or something like that that was very similar in terms of its gameplay, but like to hear that he was going from that to something that was a roguelite turn-based strategy. Obviously,
Mm,
Binding of Isaac has that roguelite element to it, but to go into turn-based strategy, I was kind of like, I'm interested to see how that's going to be able to progress and how he's going to be able to take that roguelite nature and apply it to a turn-based tactics game. And that's where, the breeding system here really comes into play in a
mm,
way that I find to be pretty staggering because of the fact that it not only speaks to his understanding of the importance of having some kind of progression system for the roguelite, even if you get that squad wipe, like hopefully you've done something that has progressed overall, like the meta aspect of this game. And so that's where the breeding system comes in, where, you get to the end of any of those zones and with your squad, and if they're still alive, you have the option of going further down the rabbit hole, the monster
mhm,
rabbit hole at that, or you can send your cats home and you have this, much like an XCOM fashion, you've got this house, it's filled with cats. Um, but as soon as your party returns to the house, they can no longer venture out on another adventure.
mhm,
So they're essentially retired, but that doesn't just mean like they hang around or you have to, let them live out their days on the farm, but they actually, you have these like high leveled cats with these abilities and these different stats. And, you know, as a day passes, there's the chance that they might basically fight or fuck at the end of the day. Like,
mhm, mhm.
and so, you know, obviously if they fight, somebody might get stats or might injure the other one, this or that. But if they actually have a kitten, that can be the next generation that inherits some type of trait from
Right.
those higher level cats that are retired now. And so, like, that aspect of it, I think is really great because it allows you to plan for the future. Like, if you get to a point, like I did a couple of times in my various runs, where, my party was basically on its back legs. We ran through the first 8 lives for them, and I was like, "There's no way I'm surviving another
Mhm,
zone." And so I decided to retire them. And that in and of itself gives me a leg up the next time that I venture out with a new party, because chances are I'll get some kind of benefit stat wise for one of my kittens that could be then again the next party, the next generation, if you will. But I just think that that's a really ingenious sort of mechanic there. And further to your point, the fact that he's able to have a mechanic like that, but then at the same time, you've got this really sort of like crude image of a cat just like giving birth right
Yeah.
after that, just like is the perfect representation, I think, of someone that is very thoughtful in how they make games, but at the same time is completely unapologetic for their more adolescent sense of humor or
Yeah.
sensibilities at that.
Yeah. It's that that like retiring your cats at the end of the run was one of the
Mm,
things that like I've had a bunch of conversations with friends about, like, because it kind of like gives like that like in theory, what I kind of was wondering if this would be more, it was like an XCOM where it's like, you can make your team and they keep going out on different runs together, and you have one person that you build up for a long time, which is nice because it breeds this familiarity. It's like very rewarding to have a character progress over time and that sort of stuff.
mm,
But it is almost more interesting in this idea of like trying to find ways to make traits passed down and that sort of thing.
yeah.
It kind of gives it this like, as we were talking about it, I was like, it's kind of more like what it's less Darkest Dungeon 1 and more Darkest Dungeon 2, where you're like
Mm,
trying to like, you just have like the team that goes out for one run, and then that run is done, and
yeah.
then you kind of have some sort of thing that you can maybe pass on, or have some sort of permanent progression or whatever.
Mm,
um and it's not, even though you have this whole house of cats at the end, by the end, you still have all this house of cats. It feels a little confusing because you're like, well, why isn't this all my team? You know what I mean? Like, you
right.
kind of look at it and you're like, well, why can't I, you forget for a while, and you're like, wait, I want to take this guy out. He's the good one. And it's like, all
Hmm.
right, I can't take him out anymore, which is, a little bit of a bummer sometimes, but I do like the way it makes you think differently, and not and also not necessarily, um like you said, like, get stuck in one way that you like to play, trying to
Yeah.
like figure out and it also, it's one of those things where like every run I feel like I have one character that's like completely broken in a different way. You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like a different strategy. I'm like, this guy's invincible. What the hell? Like, this
Right.
guy's awesome. This guy's awesome, and it's completely different in a way than anyone else has ever been awesome. So I'm glad that they don't let you do that, because it forces you to see all the other options rather than just like sending out your favorite squad every time.
Yeah, and I think likewise, just in terms of how you're able to build upon the abilities of your characters in ways that you could never like truly foresee,
Mhm,
like in terms of their roles, right? It's like I had one character that started out and they were going to be like my ranged guy.
mhm,
And that's great. But then by the end of it, I had been buffing them enough that they turned into like my healer, essentially. And that's just based upon the various upgrades and how I chose to put, their stats. If I was like buying a piece of candy that automatically levels up a guy, boosts their
mhm,
stats. Also, you get these opportunities in game or in combat where there might be this like it's a bird or it's a chicken and the first character to kill it basically gets to level up all their stats
mhm.
automatically right then and there. So like the game I think gives you enough tools that so far at least, and I've been in some crushing defeats already. I never feel like it's the game's fault. The game's playing against me type of a thing, right?
Mhm.
Is which whenever you play a strategy game and if you walk away feeling like that, chances are maybe there's a balancing issue there. But so far, I've never felt like that. It's been me making a stupid decision here or there. Um, but one bad decision, it's not quite like XCOM. One bad decision does not undo everything, at least
Mhm.
at the stage that I'm at. And I feel that like I can always hobble together enough of a strategy to basically win one last battle before sort of reassessing how I want to continue with my squad or a direction that I need to take one party member or the whole party to really, get to those boss fights, which I absolutely love the boss fights in this, by the way,
Yeah.
which is like pairing some really great strategy, but also some crushing defeats at certain points because it really does emphasize just like you have the uh, freedom to kind of like decide how you want to boost your party naturally, but you really do need to be playing to their inherent strengths
Yeah.
and thinking about how you can build upon that. Because otherwise, you're going to get into situations where it's like, yeah, you got 5 turns in you before your squad gets wiped.
Right. One thing I really like about the bosses, it's almost that like, it's that like thing of like, kind of like perfect knowledge that I was talking about before, where it's like you and it's something you obviously have to figure out, but like some of the bosses are almost like little puzzles because like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna attack this boss, it's gonna react in a certain way. So
Mhm.
how do I attack it appropriately and keep drawing aggro in different ways? Or like, this person can attack because they can take it, and trying to like figure out how to like puzzle out the best strategy. I think the boss fights are so interesting for that because they really take the system they have set up and kind of rework it in different ways that kind of make you re-strategize what you're doing in really smart ways. Like, if there's just one where it's like, I think there's one where the big guy just kind of like you hit him and then he just like moves at you like one
Yeah.
square and kind of like
Mhm.
pushes you and hits you. So it's like, okay, I have to kind of like figure out who can attack from what side and when and all
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Really clever stuff. Really clever boss design. I really like that stuff.
I mean, that boss that you just mentioned was the one I was going to reference because for the first few runs, that guy would kick my ass because,
Hmm.
like you just said, he's very reactionary. So if I lead with my melee guy and I
Yep.
hit him, all of a sudden he will hit my guy back and then move out of range. And that just creates this constant, like, okay, he basically gets two attacks a turn rather than the one.
Hmm.
Um, and so typically I find that, like, with bosses, they're designed in a manner that makes them invulnerable to the player's abilities that effectively all the other enemies don't have those same restrictions. So like if
Hmm.
you have a special ability to like freeze something, chances are you can't freeze a boss. But
Right.
in this game, that's not the case. And so I found that like the true key to destroying that boss that previously I didn't know about or hadn't upgraded my squad with the specific ability is like having an immobilize move for my
Hmm.
melee guy that will immobilize all the other fodder enemies. If I hit him with that, it immobilizes him. So now he loses his special ability. And
Yep.
I think that, designing bosses that have to play by the same rules as fodder enemies is something that is actually like kind of a rarity in
Hmm.
strategy games, I find. Typically they have these sort of like modifiers that change the game, so to speak, or change the player's game plan, which, I think that obviously has worked in other games, but sometimes I find that it's like, oh, this feels like artificially difficult because of that.
Hmm.
And so, this is where I think those bosses, exorbitantly larger health bars come into play to balance things out, right? Because some of those bosses have like 300 or 400 health,
Yeah.
which, is a lot, but I don't find that the health bars actually matter if you have a concrete strategy that you can go to or that you've been refining, which, in my opinion, is really how it should be, right? It's like, oh, well, you've got that big health bar, but that doesn't mean shit if I have this strategy that is like really ironclad. Um, so that's been my experience so far and kind of like getting to that 10, 11 hour mark.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Uh,
love a boss that's just like essentially a puzzle fight. You know what I
yeah.
mean? I think that's so good. That's the coolest kind of boss design you can do for a tactical game.
Yeah. But I have a feeling that this is not the last time I'm going to be yapping about this game on, on the podcast. I
Yeah.
think, whether I end up doing like mid game of the year predictions or not, like I feel pretty
Hmm.
confident now in saying that this is absolutely going to be one of my game of the year. And I know that's like, oh, it's fucking March. Like, what are we doing here? But really, like, from as somebody that fell in love with Darkest Dungeon 2 long after it was released, and
Mm.
has sunk like 50 hours into it recently over the last 6 months to a year. This is one that I could just see myself coming back to again and again and again, and that's even before we get any sort of new content because it's just the strategic possibilities. I've barely scratched the surface, and like I said, 10 hours in, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's kind of the other almost intimidating thing about this is
Mm,
like if you look at how much Binding of Isaac changed from
yeah.
when it was released to
Hmm.
now, like Mewgenics can is possibly going to have a huge
Yeah.
a huge life as he adds more things or changes things because that seems to be, the MO is just like continuing to let these games live and breathe and change and evolve. And it sounds like this one is even more successful than Binding of Isaac.
Hmm.
What I think it hit 1 million copies pretty recently.
Yeah.
So it's pretty clear that this one has a long tail on it, and I think it's going to be definitely, like you said, talked about by the end of the year, as one of the standouts of the year.
Absolutely. But like I said, I'm sure we'll be returning to this one in the future and whatnot. But let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll chat about our last two games for the episode. And more on that in a moment. And we are back from our break. And Aaron, for our next game, this is something that you brought to the table and kind of like basically reminded me it even existed. And it was a game that I previously had heard of, but never got around to for one reason or another. But that game being Anatomy from Kitty Horror Show.
Yeah, I had also never gotten around to this for a long like, I purchased it because it's like $3 on itch, like,
Yeah.
it's not a big it's not a big deal, but, I picked it up a long time ago and just never sat my ass down and played it. And the 10-year anniversary of it was this last month, was in February, and I was
Wow.
like, this feels like a great excuse for me to finally just sit down and play it. And damn, this turned into like one of my favorite games I've ever played. I'm a
Mm.
big fan of like stuff about like weird houses and that sort of stuff. So like this game is like kind of the quintessential like haunted house story type thing for me, and I just absolutely adored this. The real basic level of this game, like it doesn't really sound like much when you describe it. It's like you're in a house, like a standard suburban house, just pretty basic stuff, and you're just walking around finding audio tapes and going back and putting them in a tape player. And that's basically the gist of it for the most part. But the game has such an amazing atmosphere, and these tapes have such stellar writing to them.
Mm.
What the game ends up being about, as you listen to these tapes, they're like a very academic tone to them,
Mm.
and they're describing sort of like the idea of thinking of a house as a body and thinking about like what is the kitchen, what is the bedroom, what is the what are all these areas, and what are their analogs in the human body, is the living room the heart, is all these different things. And it slowly kind of ups the ante and gets more sinister about like the idea of like, is a house alive? What does it
Mm.
mean to walk through somebody's body? Is what is it? What is the house thinking about? Is the house upset? Is it from neglect? Is it? And it's just such great writing and great atmosphere, and it's really a game about setting up, especially it's hard to talk about this game without getting into a little bit of spoilers, but I'll
Mm.
be as vague as possible. This is a game that you have to play a couple times. So, like, you'll do a few runs of it, you play it a little bit, you'll get to an ending, don't stop at that ending, play it again. It will be a different run through, like, this is sort of like a like near automata, where you're kind of changing things up as you go on these
Mm.
ostensibly different runs through the game, but they're it's almost like just continuing the game.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, it's really a game about setting up familiarity and then subverting it cleverly. And that is and just the way it builds this atmosphere, like the first time you're going through, it's basically like you get a tape, you put the tape in, and then after you listen to it, it says on the screen like the next tape is in the living room or whatever. And then you go to the living room and you have this familiarity with this house because you've been going through, and it's like, okay, I know where the living room is, I'll just go there. um and then like I remember like one of the first times, like, it's not a game of jump scares. It's a game of just like little psychological scares.
Mm.
It's like, I remember being like, okay, this is one thing I should say. This house is pitch black. This house is
Yeah.
like unnaturally dark. Like, it's so dark to go through this house. It's the kind of thing where you like feel like if this were a house you're in real life, you'd be like putting your hand against the wall to make
Yeah.
sure you knew where you were. Um, I remember that one of the first things that, like, kind of made my stomach drop was, like, I'd been going through all these areas, I'm like, "Okay, go to the living room, go to the garage, go to whatever," and then it's like, the next tape is in the bedroom, and I was like, shit, that's upstairs. And like my heart, my like stomach dropped, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know what the fuck is upstairs. Like it was just like this thing of like you start to get a little familiar with it, and you're like, what could be up there? And
Yeah.
it's never anything like, at least on the first part, it's never anything like super out there and weird. It's just like this really strong writing about like, the various spots of the house. And smartly, one thing it does is usually you'll get a tape, and after a certain point it's like it starts describing the room, and then that's the next place you go to. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a tape about like, oh, the basement is the real scary spot in the house because of this and this, and then it's like, go to the basement, and you're like, fuck. I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And it's just such an atmospheric game. And the writing is so strong, and I just love the structure of it. Everything about it is just so cool to me. And you said you played this for the first time just recently?
Yeah, so I actually played it this morning,
Oh, nice.
and this was one of those games that and developers that I had heard about, like you had said you had as well, but just never got around to it. And this, by the way, for Neil, if he's listening, this would have been prime horror bite type of a
Yeah.
game to cover, because it very much is in line with the type of horror games that we love, that are short, bite-sized, and yet completely unforgettable, like from the jump. It has the very, nowadays you might say like, oh, this like PSX CRT kind of like VHS filter on
Hmm.
it and everything. It's a walking simulator, this or that. Has a lot of like anticipation to scares, but you don't have like the big jump moments. And for
Hmm.
those reasons, I really loved this. And if anything, you mentioning sort of like the darkness of the house, right? It immediately made me think of Skinamarink, that
Yeah.
film from a few years ago, which, say what you want about that film, but I think that movie does a great job of creating an environment that isn't always filled with scares, but it starts
Hmm.
to prime you for the anticipation of something that might scare you. And I think that for games such as Anatomy, that's a really impressive feat. The fact that it's able to basically do that same thing, right? And a lot of the heavy lifting here, it's not just that the environments are obscenely dark; it's that that writing of the tapes and the dialogue that goes with them, to your point, like, is so well done, and it's so unnerving, and it starts to facilitate the notion that like there might be something there, but you don't know that there is something there. And even if things become more overtly creepy the further into the game you get, it really
Hmm.
doesn't provide that moment that some people might be wondering or waiting for, like, oh, the monster or this or that. And I think the experience is better off for it. And that's probably the best
Yeah.
compliment I could give this, in that, it's able to do all of these things without going the generic route that, time and time again, we've seen lots of games that try to do things similar to this will overly rely on. And to see a game such as this, and as old as it is, I mean, God, you saying this game's 10 years old is throwing me for a loop. Um, but the fact of the matter is that like this is the type of game that does such a great job of being immersive and being unnerving. And that's all based around its atmosphere. And, atmosphere in horror is one of those things that like gets talked about to death. But like here, really, when you think about the fact that it's the strength of the writing and the
Hmm.
strength of the ways in which they've lit the environment, does a lot of the heavy lifting, like, yeah, that deserves to be celebrated because of just how effective it is. And the fact that it captures that air of horror that I think really gets ignored. And it used to be a strength of it, which is like the unpredictability of what can happen next.
Hmm.
Again, if you're able to make an atmosphere and an environment that supports that kind of a thing, for me, it doesn't matter if you have, the big monster payoff or the big scare payoff,
Hmm.
because of the fact that you are able to capture the unpredictable nature of horror in a way that, so few games now I find do. Like the anticipation of that is really fantastic. And, furthermore, this is the type of game that I could definitely hear, like Let's Players and YouTubers and whatnot be like, oh, nothing's happening in this game.
Hmm.
Like that kind of critique and commentary. But in actuality, like, I think this is a really fantastic example of someone that understands what a haunted house is and getting to the core of that. It's not just like, okay, the house was built on a graveyard and now there's spirits. It's like, no, like a house becoming haunted, and that's viewed as like a negative thing naturally, but like that's a product of the residents' behavior or past residents' behavior. And I think that this game does a really good job of highlighting and expounding on that by what you said, like a house being a living thing, and the ways in which, the dialogue of those tapes speaks to that. So I found that this was just like an incredibly powerful experience. And, naturally I played it this morning. I didn't have much time to play a second run through, but to hear that it warrants that is exciting.
So yeah, you did like the first thing where it like cuts you out, like it
Mhm.
just like it crashes. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to go through it 2 more times.
Okay.
Um, I would say
Wonderful.
that yeah, to go through it 2 more times because it is completely different. Um, like it's a completely different thing, and you're gonna love it even more.
Oh,
Um,
I'd love to hear that.
yeah, go back, play it again. Come back to me.
All right.
Yeah, it overall, I think the 3 playthroughs took me about an hour or so.
Okay.
And that and that, yeah, I think that seems right. But yeah, it's so good, dude.
Yeah.
I was just scrolling through my review here, and I did have the one quote I really liked. This was from the first one that the first playthrough that you had was when they're talking about it's a tape about the bedroom.
Mm.
And there's a quote where it said, talking about the nature of the bedroom, because like they do the thing where they talk about the basement, and then you go into the basement and then you put the tape in, and it's like, the basement actually isn't really the scariest place. It's the bedroom. And the tape is, it is here in the bedroom that we are at our most vulnerable. Each night we shut our senses to the world for hours at a time, trusting the house to keep us safe until we next wake. And I love that. I think that's so
Yeah.
good and evocative. Just like something that is like the kind of thing that will keep you up at night. Like
Yeah.
you're just like, wait, I just like blank out for hours and I have to
Mm.
trust the rest of the world isn't going to collapse around me.
Right.
I'm so vulnerable when I sleep. Why didn't I think of that? It's just so good. It's so yeah, play it again, get back to me. It's
Yeah.
man, this is so good. Yeah, Anatomy is just like it went. I had the feeling from that first playthrough. I was like, this is really great, but it's the next ones that'll really cement it because this quickly became like a top 20 game for me. Like
Mm.
I just adored this so much. It was all the stuff I like you saying Skinamarink is like totally accurate. I didn't really like Skinamarink the movie, but like this got the vibe of what Skinamarink was going for me
Right.
perfectly. Like that like feeling of the familiar becoming unfamiliar. And I also think there's a lot of there's like some elements of House of Leaves in here too in some ways that kind
Oh,
of
very
like
cool.
that's just like kind of interesting, like looks at a house and that sort of thing. And also uh The Haunting of Hill House is another big
Mm.
inspiration for it. Just kind of the idea of like a house,
Yeah.
being bad, a house
Oh,
going bad. Yeah, this game totally rules, and it's just like I said, it's like an hour long to play
mm.
through three times, and it's just that's the good stuff. It's
I
really
mean,
really great. One of the best like short form horror games I've ever played.
I love a game that like actually warrants its replay nature. Like the fact that for Horror Bites especially, we've covered countless games where it's like they boast the fact that they have multiple endings or
Mhm,
just a need to be replayed, and
mhm.
yet half of the time it's like, okay, cool, there's almost no actual redeeming value to doing that. So to
Yeah.
hear that a game that I had as much fun is a funny way to put it, but like as an experience that I enjoyed as much as Anatomy, based on one 45-minute or whatever 30-45-minute experience, and then there's reason to replay it that's as meaningful as you've indicated is that's incredibly exciting.
Good stuff.
If I wasn't inundated with games, I would do it tonight, but it's something for tomorrow. But I think also just like utilizing that haunted house and the nature of being this like suburban home
Mhm.
is something that is a great setting. As somebody that grew up in the suburbs and currently lives in the suburbs, like the notion that you can do horror that's set in the suburbs in a manner that is psychological in nature, but is not just like the equivalent of, oh, well, like the David Lynch thing of like, oh, things seem pretty on the outside, but
Mhm.
on the inside, everything is bloody and disgusting and horrifying. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, it can be horrifying here, but it, again, speaking more to like this sinister nature of, what happens in the bedroom. Well, it's not somebody got murdered. It's that you go to sleep and you're your most vulnerable. Like that
Mhm.
is one of those things. And that quote you read is absolutely perfect because
So
that's
good.
truly terrifying. And that's the type of thing that ultimately sticks with me more than any sort of like, you go up into the room and all of a sudden there's a monster that gets you or
Right.
something. It's just the notion that anything can happen to you. It could be a monster. Maybe it's your neighbor that loses their mind, that kills you in your sleep, like that kind of a
Mhm.
thing. I think is incredibly powerful. So I'm really glad you brought that to the table to chat about because, like I said, it's been on my to-do list for a while, and to get to chat about it for its 10th anniversary of all things is really, really phenomenal timing.
Yeah. Yeah. Game's awesome. People should check it out. Yeah, like I said, it's only on itch. It's not on
Right.
Steam. So,
Yep.
which is another reason I didn't play it for so long because it just
Right.
like I don't go on itch as much. So like if it's not on Steam, it's not
Mm.
front of mind.
Right.
So I just forgot about it for a long time. And then I was like, finally, this is gonna force me to play it. If
Mm.
I'm gonna write about it, it'll force me to play it. And I couldn't be happier that it did. And I actually brought this up with some of my, like, I have a Discord with some of my former coworkers, and like I have, and like I was like, has anybody played Anatomy? And somebody was like, I can't believe you haven't played Anatomy until now. Like he was like, I thought I felt that in things you talk about.
Right.
um, yeah, it was like a very like obviously Aaron type of game for everyone
Mm.
else. My friend was just like, I can't believe you haven't played this. It's so completely up your alley. I was like, yeah, I know now. I got
Oh,
like
you're
two
lucky.
other people to play it.
Mhm. You're lucky you got friends that know your taste in games very
Yeah,
well.
exactly. It comes from running a lot of tabletop RPGs for my friends, and people are
Mm.
just like,
Sure.
"Oh, this is the kind of thing you like." Because you keep putting mazes in your stuff, Aaron. Obviously, you like stuff like that. So, yeah, um, yeah,
Well,
I love this game
if anything, it makes me want to check out Kitty Horror Show's other games at
for
some
sure.
point.
Yeah, I know. I did download a collection, I think, of their stuff. Like
Mm.
they have like these different volumes of like Haunted Cities Volume 4. I see I downloaded.
Mhm.
Um, and I think they just do like collections of stuff that they've released on Patreon. That's kind of like their smaller, weirder experimental things. I think Anatomy's kind of the one
Sure.
that's the big one that they're known for. So
Sounds very similar to Puppet Combo, how they kind of
right,
have that same
right.
approach, right? Where they're more experimental stuff. Some of their stuff, actually, Puppet Combos has some stuff on Steam, but a majority of their more experimental things and whatnot are on obviously their Itch.io or
Mhm,
Patreon and
mhm,
whatnot. But no, yeah, another developer to put back on my radar. Check out some
right.
of their other stuff. But that's going to leave us with the final game that you told me you were playing recently, which is one that we've covered on the show. But I'm really excited to hear how this one ended up on your docket recently. That being a little unknown game called Half Life.
Yeah, I remember playing some of Half-Life when it came out,
Mhm.
but I just wasn't really a PC gamer at that time. Like I didn't play a lot of PC games. I was much more of a console person growing up.
Mm.
And it was just like in the window that I was not playing PC games. So I was finally like, I think I just need to sit down and play Half-Life. um, and again, a lot of my coworkers were like, I can't believe you've never played Half-Life.
Yeah, I
Um,
didn't
uh,
realize this was a first time play for you.
yes, it's a first time play for me. Well, at least, I played a little bit of it,
Yeah.
but I also played a little bit of it, however many years ago. So it wasn't really, I don't really remember a lot of it. But yeah, I'm about halfway through Half-Life right now, and it's so cool.
Mm. Yeah.
It's really cool. It's it's so awesome to see how many things they were doing that were really pushing things forward. Like
Mm.
this idea of like I'm a like in video games I've been a level designer in the past, and like this game just has level design down pat. Like I think the way it both presents interesting spaces to navigate and also interesting spaces that feel real, like it perfectly melds those two portions of level design into
Mm.
like just like masterfully. Like, you get a sense of space, not only, just from the set decoration, but also from moving around it. Just it really does a great job of guiding you around to make you familiar with places and that sort of stuff. I'm really impressed with a lot of the set pieces that it does.
Mm.
It's, I think a lot of, a couple of years before, games up to this were like, like Doom and Quake and all that sort of stuff. So it just feels like so much more focus on like big narrative set pieces in ways that kind of use the same engine, the same mechanics and stuff like that, but are
Yeah.
able to make them feel so much more narrative and dare I say cinematic or something like that. But it's just really cool. It definitely shows its age. There are definitely places where either they're just like some weird design decisions where I'm just like, there was that one of the last things I did recently was there's that big silo with the tentacles coming out of it,
Mhm.
you have to keep like sneaking past them, but you like throw grenades to like
Yeah.
distract them over,
Mhm.
and like there's a part where I was like, it would be so fucking easy to run out of grenades.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
like it's just like if I ran out of grenades, I would have to like go back like so many saves to figure out how to
Right.
redo this. Like it would just be like completely annoying. So sometimes there are things like that where I'm just like, these are real old design type decisions that, just like it's like, well, I don't know, you just fucked, start over or something. Um Also, like, man, every time I'm on a ladder, it feels like I'm fighting. It feels like I'm fighting going up a stupid ladder. And sometimes it's just like there's also like, like I said, they have really good level design stuff, but I think sometimes we were also still trying to figure out some of that. Um, those like metrics for level designs. Like sometimes I know I'm supposed to go this way, but like looking at it from a modern perspective, I'm like, this
Yeah.
doesn't read as something I'm supposed to walk on because it's like so much more narrow than I feel like it
Mm.
should be or something like that. Like, I'll just like, I think I'm supposed to go this way, but it's really narrow. Like if I were playing this now, like and somebody made a platform that narrow, I would go, they're telling me not to go on that platform.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just like that's just, we hadn't quite figured all that out yet. But man, it's cool. Obviously it has a lot of, like influences from things like, the head crabs are very, very face huggery and that sort of stuff. But man, it's just so cool.
Mm.
There's just a lot of really clever twists on it. Like I said, just really good level design of like exploring and but still kind of like being led in a loop that you're very clearly supposed to go around and figuring out
Mm.
different ways of making these big set pieces. Again, like this like tentacle thing where having to sneak around it and go in and out of dealing with it and pick up different things to go back and activate the power and then be able to blast it or whatever.
Mm.
They're just such clever twists that now of course we see everywhere, but this is this is kind of the pioneer in doing some of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot left to be said about Half-Life, but the thing that, like, I always am still so impressed with by this game, and, you can talk about the tram ride, how that was
Mhm,
instrumental in terms of, like, changing people's viewpoint about games and that games could be cinematic. First of
mhm,
all, like, first-person shooters could be these cinematic experiences as well. But I think for me, what I still am so impressed by with each installment of Half-Life, um, is the fact that they were able to interweave horror elements into a game that is first and foremost began as an action game, right? An
yeah,
action first person shooter and platformer and puzzler and whatnot. But like this game is filled with horror elements. First and
mhm,
foremost, you've got the head crabs, you've got, naturally the zombies and whatnot, but also just like the cosmic horror nature of the series that the further you get into the game, the more you realize that that really is the crux of the experience to the degree that it is a horror action game. And
mhm,
I think that that's pretty fair to stay up front. Like you don't even have to just describe it as a first person shooter that's horror adjacent. It's like, no, this is about a guy that is dealing with things outside the scope of his understanding of the universe and the, all parallel universes and the ability to travel through time and whatnot. And the notion that there's these other beings in different dimensions and whatnot. So I think for me, that's something that the first game introduces, and then the second game perfects. And that's why for me, like I love the original Half-Life, but Half-Life 2 is my favorite games of all time because of the fact it's able to take those horror elements and utilize them in a way that's even more prominent. And I don't just mean because of, I'm not sure if you've played the sequel, but I'm sure you've heard of Welcome to Raven. We Don't Go to Ravenholm, which is like the all zombie level. But like, I'm not saying that just because there's a level that's basically a horror movie with zombies, but it's more about, again, like the cosmic horror nature of it. The fact that you learn more about the various alien entities in this universe and how they have a basis in the world that was established in the original game, even if they weren't necessarily present in the first game. And so I think that, yeah, like the first game still, Half-Life, remains a really phenomenal experience that on paper I think is easy to describe. And it might, and I think a lot of times people maybe like overly simplify describing the game, but there's so much groundwork being laid here, not in terms of just the gameplay, but of the world building itself, that the sequel and the subsequent episodes capitalize on in a way that, for me, make Half-Life series one of the best series ever. And, Half-Life 2 being one of my favorite games ever. So I think that that aspect of it is just really phenomenal. And to your point, there's a couple of aspects of it that I don't necessarily think have aged all that well. Like that tentacle part, I always remember
Yeah.
being kind of just not only a pain in the ass, but just like, okay, if I fuck around and waste a grenade here and there's no
Yeah.
more, or I've expended the ones in that previous area or in that current area, then I'm kind of stuck and I have to like brute force my way through it. There's a couple of things like that that are not prevalent in the sequel. That's the other thing. Like the sequel is not just abiding by the bigger, better mentality, but it shows a fundamental uh, growth in how
Right.
Valve designed games in a way that is like truly staggering for a game that was already staggering.
Yeah. And especially since they were making the blueprint for this, I mean, like this,
Right.
this was such a innovative thing to be doing. Speaking of that horror stuff, what I love is sometimes just like walking by vignettes, like
Yeah.
just walking by like, somebody who's like in a room you can't get to, and he's like, fighting, he's like pushing a pushing a big file cabinet over on a on a head crab or something
Yeah.
like that, and then another one jumps out of a vent and grabs him and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's just like it's so good at creating those little moments. Like I think that's one of the secret sauces of it, is it's just great at creating these little moments that again, because you still have like full control during it. It's not like you're ever locked into like a cutscene. You're just walking around through it, and it's almost like going through like a fun house or something like that.
Yeah.
Some sort of horror, like a Halloweeny haunted house, where you're just like walking through and stuff's happening around you. It's really cool. It's really cool stuff.
The thing also about Valve and just especially with Half-Life, their approach to storytelling in games. You could say how simple it is, but at the same time, they create these little, almost like vignettes
Mm.
that are unforgettable in terms of like character interactions, but also in general, just like their approach to like again vignette storytelling.
Mm.
Various characters that are memorable, or just like little bits of storytelling that play out. And as soon as they happen, you move on. They're completely inconsequential to the overall narrative, but they are unforgettable little moments. And especially in Half-Life 2, there's so many little interactions with characters in the world early on and whatnot, and even further into the game
Mhm.
that are just really terrific. And seeing how the world expands on things that are introduced in the original is, yeah, I assume you haven't played the sequel,
Have
right?
not, and I was just
Okay.
gonna ask you. So I was asking some of my friends about this as well.
Mhm.
Um, should I play any of the other Half-Life expansions before playing 2 if I end up getting around to it? because I know there's like
Mhm.
Blue Shift
Right.
and
Something force. I forget what it is.
yeah, opposing forces.
Opposing
I think
forces.
yeah, I have like those are the things like I have them on Steam because
Right.
they're they were like a quarter. There's like a time when it's
Yeah.
like you buy the whole Half-Life series for $2 or whatever. So
Right.
um
Yeah, I guess my take on it would be, um, I don't feel that they are essential, to your overall
mhm,
to the narrative and everything like that. I do think that they're nice bonuses, and I had fun with them
right.
because of the fact that naturally it's giving you, different viewpoints on the original game, that being from, Barney, and then
Mhm,
also, obviously one of the soldiers, right?
okay.
And I think that that further speaks to just like Valve realizing like, oh, okay, we can return to the same universe, but but approach the story from different aspects that gives
Mhm,
you more context. But I personally, and granted, it's been a while since I played them, that context is not necessarily needed. But if you love the original Half-Life as much as, and the universe as much as
mhm,
somebody like myself does, yeah, I definitely recommend playing them. But personally speaking, I would go Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Half-Life 2 episode 1 and 2, and then you can go
right.
back and replay Blue Shift and
Yeah,
Opposing
makes
Forces.
sense. That's probably what I was gonna do because I really do wanna check out Half-Life 2.
Yeah. And, I asked had you played it or not because, a lot of people, myself included, I played Half-Life 2 before I played the original Half-Life.
That's interesting.
Just because, the nature of when I got into PC gaming, I finally had a PC that could, play games to the degree that I wanted to play,
Mhm,
like Doom 3 and Fear and all these things. And I was like, oh shit, Half-Life. And the original game, I think again, is fantastic, and I do recommend everybody play it. But I guess for me, like my experience was not hindered by not playing the original game. Granted, I had more context, obviously, for my
mhm,
subsequent replays of Half-Life 2. But I think that it's one of the rare sequels that you could play without playing the original and see it for the masterpiece it is. And then going back and replaying Half-Life would only just bolster that
mhm,
feeling. It would just make you realize, oh man, okay, I'm connecting all the dots here in a way that just give you much more appreciation, I think, for what Valve did and how, again, like ahead of its time Half-Life was, and further reinforcing how phenomenal of a sequel Half-Life 2 is.
awesome.
Yeah, but I'll check back with you at some point when you get around to Half-Life 2 and see what your take on that one is, because yeah, like I said, one of my all-time favorites. So it was very cool to hear what your impression has been of the original, considering at this point I can't think of many people I know that haven't played it, and that's not a slight. That's just the nature of things.
Yeah,
You've probably got 100 games on your list of things you've completed that I haven't even
of
begun to
course,
touch.
yeah.
But that's one of the fun things about, I think, this like grab bag feature that we're taking with the show, because of the fact that it like, yeah, gives people an excuse to either chat about something that they're playing that's not in the general consciousness, if you will, of
Mhm.
games discourse, but at the same time, like you don't have to have much of a reason to chat about something anymore. So
In the past year, I've really been trying hard to go back through my backlog and pick up some of these things that
mm,
these like classics that I've owned for a while and haven't ever gotten to.
yeah,
And this is definitely the oldest of the classics that I've played through this like
well,
effort on my part.
mhm, yeah. I mean, well, if this is something that's on your list, it's a good problem to have, so to speak.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for what we're covering this week. You had a good heap of offerings to chat about this week, and I was glad that there was some crossover. That's the thing. Like, I love getting to have people on, and Neil included, like getting to chat about games that I haven't played because it hypes me up for them. So it was great to get kind of like a nice balance of that this week, where some stuff I haven't played, but then also we could kind of revel in stuff that we both have a appreciation and a sort of affinity for.
Yeah, quite a wide variety here
Uh,
of different experiences.
I would definitely say so. And yeah, just again, thank you for the quick sub in this week because of my unfortunate schedule threw Neil off for his availability, but we were very lucky to have you subbing in and getting to chat about things this week. So thank you, man. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. This was great.
Thank you for listening to this week's main feed episode of Safe Room. If you've enjoyed our horrifying discussions, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your preferred podcast platform, as this helps us immensely in ensuring that the show continues to grow. For any and all show updates and additional content, you can follow Safe Room on all of our socials, which are linked in the episode notes, at SafeRoomPod. And finally, you can send any and all emails to saferoompod@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
Watch The Toxic Avenger now on Screambox. The radioactive superhero that's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes is available to watch now from the comfort of your home. Bloody FM listeners get a special introductory offer by going to bit.ly/ToxyFM. That's bit.ly/ToxieFM for a special offer on Screambox.
Sometimes you gotta do something.